Hola.
Hola, hola, buenas noches, good
Hi.
night, good evening.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Screen. Let's get real, for real, for real.
For real, for real.
For real, for real, for real. Tonight we're super excited because we have a special guest, Monique López.
D. Lopez.
Monique D. Lopez. With an accent on the O. So we have Monique Lopez, who's going to be joining us from Southern California, from Los Angeles. And we're just super excited. Sorry, I was like pushing buttons over here, and I'm like, wait, what? So yeah, we're really excited to hear a little bit about Monique's journey. And you know, we personally have known Monique for a long time. Not only is she an artista, she's familia. She's our family member. Abel went to undergrad with Monique, and I became a relative por matrimonio because we got married. So we've known Monique for a really long time, and we're really excited to welcome her.
Yes.
Monique is shown with El Comalito in group shows as well as in as a solo exhibit, and her work is super well received. I think that I'm really excited for y'all to hear her speak because you know, the work has such a different impact in person than it does online because of scale, and we'll have Monique talk a little bit about that, but we're just really excited.
Oh, she's here.
So,
Saludos, everyone.
saludos. So Monique is going to be joining us. So we're just waiting for her to log on. Thank you so much for your patience. And hola, Madre Luisa, and hola, Cristal Galindo, and hola, Susana.
Happy National Margarita Day.
Yes, happy National Margarita
I can't even
Day.
say it because we already had a couple.
No, thank you so much to everyone who's joining us today. And you know, for those of you who are new, these are artist conversations that are just candid and real, where artists get to share their experience, and really the intention is for folks to see that each artist's journey is so different, even though there may be some parallels, and then there's also some major differences. Hola, Luisa. Hey,
Oh, there you are.
Yes, he is.
Making an entrance.
Yes. So good to see you, Monique. We were just sharing with folks before you came on that tonight is actually really special because not only are you a fellow artist, your family, and I was sharing with folks that Abel and you know each other from way back, from your kindergarten years. And that I became family through marriage, but nonetheless, we love you, and I hope you love us back, girl. But if you don't say it, don't say it live. So tonight, um, so tonight is special because we get to share, you know, some space with you, and we shared with folks that not only have you exhibited with El Comalito Collective in group shows, you've also had solo shows, and one of the things that we're really excited for folks to get out of tonight is to hear you speak a little bit about the work, because I think that it lives differently online than it does in person. And you know, a huge part of that is scale and how invasive the work is in a space, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you've shown it in Comalito, that folks are just like, oh, I saw the advertisement online, and then I came in, and it's so different, right?
Yeah.
And that folks are just blown away by your work. So I'm excited. We're excited to get to talk to you a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, I think a lot of the times we say that we assume that everyone's an artist that's joining us. So we always like to preface the whole conversation by asking what your relationship is to that term. And if you identify yourself as an artist, and when did you start identifying as an artist?
That's a heavy question.
Yes. It's National Margarita Day, girl. Grab your drink.
You know, I think I didn't use the term artist for a long time. I think people titled me an artist before I did. I think just being a young person liking to paint and draw and discovering this gift and taking this journey, and then I think a big piece of it happened when me and Abel met at Cal State Long Beach, and it was like going to galleries and seeing what this art world was all about, and really wondering if, we could be a part of it, or I could be a part of it as a woman of color. And, you don't see at that time, and we were looking like early 2000s, you didn't see too many people like us in galleries and spaces like that. So there was a challenge. There was a challenge in that, and how is it going to happen? So inevitably we just made it happen. We pursued it, or I pursued it. And I think probably when I got into graduate school is when I started to really consider myself an artist. I don't know if it was because I was going for my master's degree, or I just felt like my work had developed so much that I started to consider myself an artist. But even now I use it very humbly. I'm not like, oh, I'm an artist. I'm just like, yeah, I like to make stuff.
Well, that's another thing too, right? Like your practice isn't just traditional drawing and painting. It involves sculpture, and it involves installation. And can you talk a little bit about like that process?
But actually, I have a question before we talk about the process. I'm just curious about the relationship with the term artist. And we'll dive into the process in just a second. But I guess the question that I had was, because that label, like you said, Monique, is so heavy. If you're not identifying as an artist, you just identify as someone who makes things. Like, what was your relationship to that label prior to grad school? Like, were you like just exploring, or when you shared like what your major was, like what was that conversation like?
It depended on who I was talking to. When you talk to your family, it's different because some of them don't understand the process of becoming an artist. Like the first question when you decide you're going to venture, well, for me, venturing into the art was like, well, what are you going to do with that? That was the common question.
How are you going to make money, right?
Like, are you really going to make money from that? And what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, but when it happens, I'll let you know. Because I can be smart, sometimes.
Yeah, no, for real.
So yeah, it just depended on who I was talking to. And I think too, it's a term, you just decide when to use it. You know what I mean? Talking to professors, you weren't an artist, you were a young artist. That was another thing. It's like, well, you're a young artist, and well, I've been painting for, so long. It's like, well, you've only been painting for like 5 years. So how much of a painter are you? So those type of questions were posed. And that's why even now I just use it very humbly, because I'm still growing and I'm still evolving. And like Abel mentioned, there's just so much to my process and so much to what I do, because I just don't do one thing. I'm ever evolving as an artist, and so is my work. So, yeah.
Did you find that your family, that it was different in terms of like, you mentioned that some of your family didn't understand, like, is it going to make you money, or like what does an artist mean? What does that look like? Did you find that your family has become either more supportive, or that your friends were like more supportive of you becoming an artist in your family, or like I guess your loved ones, whatever that looked like, friends and family, like were they supportive of your journey, or were they more like, it's cool as a hobby, but what are you going to do, girl?
My parents were super supportive. My mom, she's an artist. She's amazing. She doesn't call herself an artist. She's like, no, you're the artist. I'm not the artist. I'm like, well, I got it from you, Mom. Like, I got it from somewhere. And my mom's a sculptor. She does hair. She sews. My mom does amazing stuff.
She walked me through how to fix my washer.
Yeah, my mom's awesome. Moms are great. Mamas are amazing. But my parents, or my dad was very supportive. My dad was like, he saw me, I used to draw trees. My cousin Monica always reminds me of a story. She goes, I remember when you were little and you would draw trees. I would draw trees all the time, but I wouldn't just do like the straight line and the puffy cloud. Like I would actually draw the branches and the leaves. And my dad would look at it. I probably was like 6, 7 years old. He's like, what 6-year-old draws a tree like this? Like,
this
so my dad, my dad saw it, you know. So when I came, you know, I was an honor AP student in high school, and you know, was accepted to universities, and I decided to go to community college because I wanted to venture and see what I could do with this art talent or gift. And my parents were super supportive. It was people outside that were kind of like, well, what are you going to do with that? Even though there's an artistic thread in my family, I was the one that pretty much was like, I'm going to go after this because I can see myself doing this. I want to do this. It was just something, it was a need and it was a passion I had to go after. And it's not easy. It's not an easy journey. It's not.
No,
Yeah.
we know, you know, we
Yeah.
definitely know. And, you know, I'm so thankful that you bring up the family being supportive because, you know, it's so polarized in terms of like, our Chicano Latinx identity in terms of like you often hear that it's not supported, right? So it's beautiful to hear the contrasting story, which is your family, your at least your parents being very supportive.
Yeah. But let me mention as I pursued my journey into the art world or being an artist, and they started to see my work develop, and they started me, you know, seeing me do shows and, you know, co-curate with Abed on certain things that we did. They were like, oh, okay. Then they started to understand, and they would come to the shows and they would support, and they were like, okay, you're really doing this. And then they saw the potential, and now I'm fully supported. They're amazing, you know. So, you know, it takes a while, but I think, you know, if they're young artists or artists out there that, you know, their family isn't supporting them, just do your thing and show them, you know, just don't say it, show them. And once you show people, it just, oh yeah, okay, cool. You know, it'll come along. People will start to join you on your path and support you. And it you know, one thing I've learned about being an artist is the community. The community you build is so important. It really is.
Absolutely.
It really, really is.
Absolutely. Well, 20 something years later, it's like we can attest that finding those folks that you can trust and that you share a special love for the things that you're making, that I mean, that will follow you for a long time, and it's part of your growth.
Yeah.
So I thank you.
Yeah, we had each other. I know. No, we were like babies when we met. We were what, 23, 24? A long time ago.
21.
Was it that long?
Yeah, it was like our early 20s.
I'm like, that's how old I am now. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. So it was cool because I remember at that time I wanted to. I remember I like put it out in the universe, and I was like, I need someone that like wants to go to shows and like really wants to see what art is. What's this thing all about? And because I just don't. You can't really do it alone. Like I brought up before, it's about community. And then I met Abed, and it just like took off. You know. And I learned a lot. Like, speaking of the process, you know, we were at Cal State Long Beach. I was a oil painter. I have a guilty pleasure of doing landscape and still lifes. And then I remember I started working, you know, I was painting these really abstract oil paintings, and Aved and I were in the studio, and he was like, you got to work on watercolor paper. You got to work on watercolor paper. And I was like, okay. And the day came where he just showed up with this big old roll of watercolor paper and was like, here, do it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, he definitely helped me. And then it went from watercolor paper to Duralar, which is what I work on now. He was like, here you go. You know, he pushed me in different direction. And it was helpful. It was really helpful, and we just grew together. And even through graduate school, we just kept through webcam like this, you know, talking online and guiding each other and supporting each other. So
studio, late night studio.
So, you know, I really appreciate that I have someone that has seen everything from the beginning and can contest to like everything I've gone through to get to where I'm at now, which is Abed. So. You know,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Monique, I think that I also kind of cut off Abel's question earlier because he was veering off script a
I
little
know.
bit. I'm just kidding.
I was excited.
I'm just kidding. But he did mention that you're a multifaceted artist, right? That you don't just do one thing. Do you mind addressing that, going back to that question that Abel initially had posed, which is to address kind of like the different mediums that you use, your process, that you do installation, that you do kind of a little bit of everything. Do you mind talking a little bit about the different processes that you have as well as your subject matter?
Yeah. So my subject matter, ever since I was a child, I had a really fascination with the microscope. I just love my mom got me a microscope when I was 12 years old, and I loved it. And I just love looking through it and like breaking things down and, just to these like little simple complex shapes. And I thought it was so cool. And then, it's just something that carried on with me through, my adolescence and early adulthood. And then my father passed away when I was 20. And then when my father died, he passed away from cancer and cirrhosis. And I wanted to know what this thing was. And I was like, what happened? Because I saw my father wilt away right before my eyes. I was like, what? This isn't, he didn't look like who he was, physically.
Yeah.
And I remember I went onto, the internet and I typed in cancer. And this like microscopic image, it was saturated with color and it was so beautiful. And I was surprised by what it looked like because the forever question for me in my practice is, how can something beautiful be deadly? And that's why the work is, I work with color a lot with my work, and I use a lot of embellishments and stuff to bring that beauty, to show the beautiful part when it's really not. What it does is object, and it just deteriorates and tears down, the body. So like I said before, it went from oil painting to watercolor and pouring, and then the cutting, and making these huge pieces, assemblages in the room. And doing that, when I do that type of installation work with the assemblages, it's having this like entity be in the room. So the room becomes like the body that's infected. So when the viewer comes in, they're a part of it as much as the space is, so you're in that space with it. And I think that's something that's been ongoing when it went from, the watercolor pieces to the big Duralar cutouts. And then loving working with textile and having the specimens now in these Petri dishes. It's just different ways of how to show something that can be invasive, but how it's contained and uncontained, So that's pretty, in a nutshell, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how I work. Yeah.
And to kind of share a perspective that's a little bit of a more detached third person perspective, because I was not part of your journey in terms of like y'all's journey from undergrad to today. I don't remember the first time that I saw a solo exhibition by you, Monique. I had seen individual pieces, but the first time that I saw a solo was actually with us. And I remember giving you the keys to El Comalito, and then you showing up and installing and then leaving and like just doing it, taking your time with your show, I think over the course of a week, if I remember correctly. And I was there to assist for some of it. And then I was also there, and I was also gone for a large portion of it. And I remember like being your assistant for some of the installation and being like, oh my gosh, these pieces are beautiful. And then walking away, I think on like day 2 or 3, and then not coming back until the final day. And then having a completely different experience because, like you mentioned, I think that there's something really like polarizing, I want to say, because in days 1 through 3, I was like, oh my gosh, Monique's work is beautiful. And then finally on opening night, I realized I'm in a room, and the room is the body, and it's infected with disease. And it's not just pieces on the What was that?
It was filled with pearls,
It was
right?
filled with
Yeah.
pearls, yeah, and it was like the entire room was filled with these installation works that completely consumed you, right? So it went from beautiful to like, holy shit, this is
What
intense.
is going on?
What is
Yeah.
going
And you
on?
told me there were some people that couldn't stay in the room.
Yeah,
They walk in and they were like, "Oh no," and I'm like, "But they're pearls." You know, it's like the whole thing of like pearls. Yeah, pearls being like they got scared. And I actually had one woman talk to me during the show. She came up to me and she said she came in, and she walked out, and then she came back in to talk to me. And she said it was really hard for her because it reminded her of her husband who had passed away from lupus,
mm,
and you know how his kidneys looked and things like that. So I had some really great conversation. That's when I met Monica, too, Monica Haro. I
yeah,
got in touch with her, and that was another great conversation. And I mean, you know, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this. I hope she doesn't get mad at me. But she's a breast cancer survivor, and she even told me, she goes, you know, with everything that I've gone through, and this is when we did the group show with Arlene.
hmm
She, you know, we had a conversation, and she says, you know, you take something so traumatic and devastating and you make it so beautiful. So for her, it was this comfort, you know, and I thought that was amazing, you know, because I get kind of tiptoeish, you know, I get kind of like I'm walking on eggshells when sometimes when I make this work and I know someone who's come in who's dealt with a disease or disease, and then how are they going to react? And I know there were some people that were really, you know, had critical, you know,
emotional for sure.
because I hadn't gone through it. But that's also a difference about my concept. It's that a disease doesn't just affect the person, it affects everyone around them, you know. And I thought I was having an indirect, you know, experience with it. And that was how I was able to exhaust my trauma from it. And that was through my artwork, you know, and I'm still doing it, you know, and now living through the pandemic. I mean, I know it's going to take on an entirely different. I'm excited to see how the work changes now that we're living through this pandemic, you know, because I'm like, I'm living through my concept right now, you know, because it's changed so many people's lives, and people are suffering. And I mean, come on, I packed up and moved back to Los Angeles. I was in San Francisco when it started. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited to see how the work changes now, you know, living through this pandemic.
And you know what's
Yeah.
impressive about your work, Monique, is that when we were in undergrad, we talked about how we could occupy a white cube, a space that necessarily wasn't for us, and
Mm-hmm.
how, and if we did get that chance to show the work, what kind of impact would we have? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
that when I think of those ideas or those conversations, I think about the impact that your work has and
Mm-hmm.
how you blew it out. Like it literally doesn't have a frame, right? And we talked about how for
Yeah.
for for people of color in an oil painting school, painting within a frame for us was like, well, yeah, there's limitations, and then this is a European tradition. So how do we
Mm-hmm.
expand on that conversation? And so that's how we
Yeah.
started talking about materiality and what other things we could work with. And so just
Mm-hmm.
seeing your work progress through the years, like I feel that if if we would have walked into that space, if we would have walked into Comalito as young students at Cal State Long Beach, I
We would have
feel
been
that
like,
you know, because people say a lot of the times too,
oh!
like, I wish I would have been exposed to something that would have like completely
Mm-hmm.
changed my perspective on how to view art, right?
Yeah.
And I think you do that with your work in the sense that physically it's not traditionally hung. You're making people aware of the room itself and how they're
Yeah.
relating to the work, and the work is speaking back to them. And so I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
the powerful part of your work.
It's site specific, you know, because if I ever hung filled with pearls again, it would not be the same, you know. And even, you know, a lot of the installations I've done, they're just not the same. They don't, and some of those pieces I don't even have anymore, so they've kind of, you know, gone away.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I remember those spaces, like how are we going to change the space and breaking the frame and the limitations of the frame. I like that you brought that up. Um, we talk a lot about that. Yeah, Leah Clark in The Death of the Plane. One of my favorite readings that I like. But yeah, I think too now dealing with, it's gone from the uncontained to the contained with the specimens, the petri dishes. And I think during the pandemic, once we went into shelter in place, and I was in San Francisco, I thought, oh, I'm going to work on all this stuff and I'm going to get a lot of things done because I have more time now. And that just didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I think because I was just dealing with all the sudden change, seeing the change in the city, how people were reacting to each other, how I felt about it, it was really uncomfortable. And the one thing that came to mind, I remember sitting in my apartment all by myself, and thinking about this thing outside. And I thought, oh my God, this thing has me contained now.
Mm.
And what does that mean? Like, I'm inside a container and it's not safe for me to go out. This is right in the beginning. So that's why I said before, I'm wondering how the work's going to change now with that experience of being inside and being afraid and all the things we have to do to protect ourselves from this thing that's just roaming around, and we're trying to control. Yeah.
Monique, do you find, or have you found, I know that you transitioned from the beginning of pandemic, being in San Francisco to now being in LA. And during that time, have you found that you've needed to put the work down and like work on maybe something else or something with a different subject matter because of it being so close in terms of
when I was in San Francisco, that's when I started to draw the roses. I started to work on something else because I
beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. I started to draw the roses, and I think I got one commission when I was there, and I just couldn't touch the work. I couldn't look at it. I didn't want to see it. And then when I moved home, I don't know if it was the comfort of being around my family or being closer to my mom. I'm now starting to work on it again, and that too, coming back home and seeing how much it's changed, because I was gone from LA for 12 years. And the city's changed. It really has, and it's different. The sun's always out, it's warmer over here. There's more light. So I see a lot more color coming into the work. San Francisco's pretty gloomy and dark and gray. And the color really didn't exist in the work in San Francisco. But now that I'm back home, the color's starting to come back. And that's exciting. And also too, I'm staying with my aunt, who I grew up with, making floral arrangements and bouquets and decorating for weddings and all that. So being in her presence is just bringing back all those things she taught me about floral arranging and all that stuff, which a lot has been an influence when I do the installations and remember all those things she taught me as far as decorative items. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Yay. Yeah. That's amazing. One thing that comes to mind, because you shared about color and how it's coming back to your work, and I just wanted to quickly share a funny story, if you're okay with it. About the story is titled "Stop." What was that?
I think Susana is on here. She knows that story too.
So Monique and Abed and I think it was just the three of us. I can't remember. We're hanging out pre-pandemic, of course.
What was the fourth?
Oh, yeah. Susana was there too?
Yeah, Abed and Susana.
Would you like to tell the story, Monique?
No. You can tell it. You can tell it.
No, go ahead. You're a great storyteller.
So, just Edgar's always amazed that I can double task, that I can be like working on something and they're having a conversation and they think I'm focused and not listening. And I'm like, no, that's not what. And I just come up with like an opinion or a reaction and they're like, you're listening? I'm like, yeah. He's like, Edgar's like, how do you do that? How do you work on something and still pay attention to something that's going on over here? So anyways, I'm working on this drawing that was going to be for Filled with Pearls. And I'm sitting in the living room and I'm drawing. And and I keep drawing, and all of a sudden I hear stop and screaming at me. I'm like, what? He's like, stop! You've drawn enough. You're gonna ruin it. Yeah,
She
I
had
still have that piece. I still have that piece.
she had started with this drawing that was like the drawing was a big circle with a negative space in the center, and it was
Yeah.
closing in, and that negative space was getting smaller and smaller, and like my ADHD just couldn't take it anymore, and I'm like, stop! Don't close the circle.
It was funny. And I was just about to stop when you said it. I was like, I'm stopping. So calm down.
That's so funny.
It was,
That's really great.
The influence of your environment, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Monique, do you mind sharing? And I know that this is kind of you kind of talked a little bit about this in terms of like what it's like as with your experience as a Chicana, a woman of color, right? Like, what has your experience been navigating the art world, especially in a field where like Chicanx, Chicano work is often expected to be very figurative, and your work works with the figure in a different way, you know. And I think that that's really powerful, and you bring something new to Chicano work. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
It's been a struggle. It's been a struggle because my work doesn't fit the margin that's been set for Chicano art. But I keep trying to push it in. Like, nope, we do this too. At least I do. And I think, you know, I want to add to that conversation of what Chicanos, Latinx people do. I was thinking about that question because I knew it was going to come up. And I'm like, if people really look at the pyramids and how things were laid out by our ancestors, it's pretty abstract in thought. And even in the design, it's not, it's representational, but it's on a fine line of abstraction as well, but they make these shapes swirl, the movement of the line and, and then we're able to make out that, yeah, it is a serpent or it's, so it's been difficult. And it's funny that you bring out how I deal with the body in a different way, because I remember having a curator come over to my apartment because I work at home. I don't have a formal studio. I work where I have space. And they came over and, I was telling them about that struggle about the white cube and being a Chicana and not necessarily fitting it, but yet I'm an abstract artist, or an artist, and yet I don't fit the margin of Chicano art. And he brought up the point of, well, Chicano art is primarily figurative. And I did say, I understand that, but I am dealing with the figure just in a different way. And he paused and just looked at me. Because I'm looking at it through a microscope, and bringing the micro to the macro. So it's been hard, but I just push forward. I do what I love, and I love making things that are related to the body as far as microscopically, referencing disease cells and dealing with color and dealing with space and changing, transforming the space to become something else, and even using materials. I was using black garbage bags in graduate school to make these like black cells and, and then, just very domestic items. And I think that's another conversation Aved and I had is what was available to us, what's available to the common person, what can we use that's just around us. So me using ballpoint pen is enabling people to see that you can pick up a pen that's at your table and makes a piece of fine art or something that's considered art. It doesn't have to be this like most expensive paint or tool, or you can make it with something that's an everyday item, fabrics and, like in my work, there's fabric, there's sequins, there's beads, there's all kinds of stuff, and there are things that can be found in your home. It could be found on an old sequins top you have, or, your grandma's old earrings, or just things that are accessible. It's about accessibility, and knowing that you can make something from nothing, something that's considered trash, and bring it back and give it life in another way.
And that's really powerful. And I think that one of the things too that kind of comes to mind when you were sharing about how you work with the body in a different way, or the figure in a different way, is that not only do you do that, I think that one of the really powerful things about your work too, Monique, and something that was kind of like an aha moment for me within my own art journey through your work, was that not only are you working with the figure in a different way, your work does not have a subtle relationship with the viewer, meaning that the figure in your space, in the gallery, the viewer, the participant, is also having a very specific relationship with the body of work, right? Because they're within this infected space, and they don't get to choose to move on to the next piece, because even if they move on to the next piece, the work
It's
is
just
still
invasive.
yeah,
It's invasive.
it's invasive.
It's meant to be.
Yeah, and that's intentional, and I think that that's really powerful, because then the figure within the space becomes part of the work, right? And I think that that's powerful, and that that's a really cool angle in terms of like how the figure is involved within the work.
Yeah. No, it's I'm excited to do more installations. Yeah, installation work. So I'm continuing to work on the specimens. I'm working on some new Dural art pieces. And I'm hoping to continue doing my altares for Dia de los Muertos. So I started that with Soma Arts when I was in San Francisco. That's something else that I do. It became an annual project for me when I was living in the Bay. And I was working with Soma Arts. So that was something new too. That I got involved in because of my friend David Tafoya, who you guys know.
Yeah.
One night he's like, come with me to Soma Arts. They're having this. He told me it was an opening, and it was actually the meeting for the Day of the Dead show.
Friend.
You're welcome.
And that's when I met the wonderful and late Rene Yanez and his son Rio Yanez, and started working with them. And that was a whole nother experience. And I'm really glad that my friend David did that for me, because it brought me it's an of course, as you know, it's an indigenous practice. It was something from our ancestors, and it's sacred, and I just loved doing it. It does something for me. And I know you promoted the one that I did of Coatlicue, but my most favorite one is the one I did for my dad.
Yeah, I shared both.
Yeah. So the one I did for my dad, it was a coincidence, because that was the same year that I did that, the year that Rene passed away, which was Rio's father. Mm-hmm. And the timing was just perfect. And making that altar was a lot of closure for me, because I honored my dad, and it was, the peacock, and you know how much I love the peacock. It's my favorite bird. And so I hope to do one next year with them. We'll just see what time allows. Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And as we're getting close to the end of your artist talk, if folks who are on would like to type in any questions for Monique, we'll be taking questions in just a few minutes. And I did see a few comments coming up in terms of like art being elitist, and yes, absolutely. And I think that that's why it's so important that artists like Monique and other artists of color and artists who are, I think, breaking down the social constructs of what art is are so important. So I did see that comment, and I just wanted to address that. And then while we wait for folks to see if anyone has any questions, Monique, I hear through the grapevine that your nickname on the street is Color Queen. Can you talk?
I used to be called Miss Color Theory.
Miss Color Theory. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to color and why that is?
I love color. I have had a fascination with color since I was a child. I was coloring. I mean, if I had my Crayola, my crayons, and my coloring books, I was a happy camper no matter where I went. So I guess I'll tell this story. When I was 4 years old, my mom gave me the box of 64 crayons, Crayola crayon box with the sharpener on the back. And
yes.
I was like, I remember getting that box of crayons and thinking I had every color in the world, right? Because it was huge. You're 4 year old. You think this big old box, you have everything, right? So I'm there coloring, and I wanted to color a specific color that I knew existed. And I went to my crayon box and I got upset because it wasn't in there. And I'm like, I know there's more color than this because I've seen it. I know. And I started to mix my crayons as a 4 year old. I was like grabbing, colors and mixing them on the paper and then seeing all these new things and all these new colors emerge. And yeah, I've just always loved color. And even growing up, I used to do collages. They would be from floor to ceiling in my bedroom. My mom would get me magazines. My mom wanted me to be creative. She wanted me, and my dad. And yeah, I just have this love for color, and there was a time when the color went away. Abel can contest to that. He knows there was a time when I couldn't paint color, and he's like, "You need to paint color." Yeah, it was a crazy time, So, and even when I was in grad school, my work went completely black, So it comes and it goes, but I learned every part of the journey. I've learned from it, and I love looking back at the work. There are times when I'll sit back and I'll pull out my portfolios and whatever works I have, I'll look through them and lay them out, and just it's exciting to see where the work has come from and imagine where it's going. And that's what I appreciated about the collaborative show that I had with Monica and Arlene, when I was able to put all the work up, the majority, a lot of them. And that was fun to see the evolution of it, just to see where it's going. So
Definitely.
I'm excited for what's to come next. I'm excited to see it because it's in there somewhere. It just hasn't come out yet.
We have a question for you, Monique. X10 Studios is asking, are your installations made for specific spaces, and or do you install in, I missed it went up, or do you reinstall a piece in a new space? And before you answer that too, I just want to share that tomorrow what I'll do is I'll post some of the the pictures from a wider angle so that folks can see the installation within the room. So that'll be so look out for those posts so you can see Monique's work from a wider angle.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Monique.
The question was, is it for a specific space, and do I install other places?
The question is, are your installations made for specific spaces, and or do you ever reinstall in a new space? Meaning, like, are you making it for site specific, and then are you able to reinstall somewhere else, or is it like a one-time deal?
No, I think the thing about the installations is I go into the best way for me to describe it is I'll go into the space and the curator will be like, okay, this is your wall or this is your area. And I'm like, okay. And then I go home and I start working on stuff and I just do it, make it. And then when I feel like I have enough to fill the room, or I'm just like, okay, I'm going to have to make this work, then I go into the space and I make it work. So the magic, like the parts don't start to come together till I'm actually in the space. So I actually don't know what it's going to look like. I just go with how I feel, yeah. So there's somewhat like site specific, but if I had to install it again, I would. It just wouldn't look the same because it conforms to the space. You know what I mean? The whole composition of it is based on the space that it's going to be in. Because I remember being in one show where it was when I was in graduate school, and I went in with like these big old black Sal looking things, and I was working with steel mesh scrubber, unraveling it, things you clean your pans with, unraveling it, and the guy that was curating the show was like, what does this look like? I'm like, I don't know, just tell me where it needs to go. And he's like, well, what does it look like? I'm like, I don't know, you just need to give me a wall and I'll make it happen. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put you here. And it was like this long wall, kind of column wall looking thing. And when I put it up, he was like, wow, like, and it was perfect because it related to the compositions on my Duralar pieces. So to see it in like form was amazing. That was Pestilent that I did. So yeah, I make them they're site specific, and yet they're not, because they will change depending on the space.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think Artana 43 had a comment about the way that you hang your work and the conversations that you're having with the work have a lot to do with access, and that some folks are not ready to have those conversations. And I personally totally agree. But yeah, like access to death, access to healthcare, access to resources. And one of the things that your work does is that it makes it accessible because it's very in your face in terms of how it's hung, in terms of how you display the work. So I think that was more a comment than a question. But
and it's not just about a specific disease. It's more about a lot of the diseases that happen in our community and out and just around the world. You know, just so many things, and how we're always trying to control it or heal it or do something to make it feel better, but it's still there, you know. And it's like, how do we, like I said in my statement, like, how do we put the pieces back together when it just seems like everything's falling apart? And that's the great disease. But, you know, always trying to look at the brighter side of things. And I think that too is relational to making the work look beautiful, you know, to bring some type of comfort, but yet there's an attraction and a repulsion. So that too brings discomfort with some.
So poetic. Were you going to say something? No. So as we get ready to close, thank you everyone for welcoming Monique and for joining us. Know that this artist talk will live on our Instagram, and we'll also put it on our YouTube page, and then you can listen to other artist talks. But before we say goodbye to Monique, we wanted to ask you, are there any actually, two things. The first one is, what's the funniest art-related story that you've ever had, to leave kind of like on a funny, goofy note, or an artist pet peeve that you'd like to share? I'll give you a second to think about that. And then the other thing is, are there any anything that you'd like to plug, any projects, anything to look out for, anything that you'd like to share, maybe something folks don't know about you or the work that you would like to end with?
Well, right now I'm back in school. I'm getting my teaching credentials. That's been a lot of my focus has been on that. I started teaching last week. So that's a new endeavor. So that's taken a lot of my energy and my time. I am working on some work, but not as much as I would like to, because, like, you know, your focus gets depending on where it needs to be. But right now there's really nothing coming up, just my own personal projects that I'm doing on my own. As far as a pet peeve, I think when I was younger and people were finding out that I draw and I paint, they would always ask me if I could draw them. Like, that was the first question. Like, you're an artist, can you draw me? It's like, no. That used to drive me nuts. Now I'm like, you know, now that I've, you know, gotten better with my drawing skills, you know, but I'm still not. I mean, Abed is an amazing figurative drawer. Yes, you are. Don't get all bashful. Yeah.
The answer is now, like, people asking, you're like, here's my rate sheet, and then they go.
Just kidding. But yeah, that was like a pet peeve of mine a long time ago. Now it's, you know, if they ask me that, I'll be like, you know, I'm not a figurative artist, but I do know some people that really are amazing with the figure, and I can send you their way. Yeah, it's not my strength. I can do it. It just takes me a while.
You're brilliant, like, Monique. You're brilliant.
Like, for example, Crystal Galindo, when I see her paint, I'm like, oh God, how does she do it? Like, how does she just like la la la? It's just like effortless, right? Yeah.
She's like, oh man, my 5-year-old helped me, and I'm like, what the heck?
Okay. She's so sweet. Yes. Yeah.
Aww. Well, thank you so much, Monique, for being with us, and for you know, being a beautiful artist, and for being part of our familia. And we love you. And
thank you for having me.
There we go. And know that I mean, Monique is part of El Comalito Collective. So not only is she an artist, she's part of. I mean, she was there when we were painting and you know. Figuring out what Comalito was going to look like in that vision. So thank you so much. I even did
merchandising in the store.
No, don't remind me, because she's going to send me an invoice. No, like, You've been there from the very beginning, Monique, and know that we love you. And you know, you're not gonna. This is not the last you see of Monique. Monique, when we have a space again, Monique's work will be shown again and again and again, just because it's powerful and amazing, and you're brilliant. So anyway, I need to end this, otherwise I'm gonna continue to just rave about how amazing you are, Monique.
All right, guys, thank you for having me. It was great seeing you, and thanks for everyone who joined in today. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Margarita Day.
Happy Margarita Day.
Happy Margarita Day. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.